And rating agency Moody says Nigeria's B2 credit profile remains constrained by the continued exposure of its balance sheet to shocks because the government has been unable to expand its non-oil revenue base sufficiently. The agency is projecting that Nigeria's economy will grow 1.9%, up from 0.8% in 2017. According to the agency, higher oil prices and oil production of around 2 million barrels per day helped the economy to improve this year. Well, Temple Ashaju will have this conversation with an economist and the CEO of CFG Advisory, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, at our NSC studio. Well, Temple, we've seen Moody's projecting 1.9% growth for Nigerian economy. However, yesterday we heard the federal government, of course, forecasting about 3% growth in 2019. So I guess Tilewa should be able to put all of this in context for us.
Absolutely. He will be able to put all of that in context for us. And thank you so much, sir, for joining us this morning on Credit or on Business Morning. Looking at this report from Moody's service, what do you basically make of it, sir?
Well, first of all, I think what is important when you see a Moody's report is to take a look at the credit rating we've given Nigeria. B2, which says outlook stable, which in its sense is quite positive for Nigeria. But the underlying issues of the report that it begins to address has to look at the strength and the weaknesses within our economy. The weaknesses within the economy remains the same, and we need to address those issues. First of all, the economy predicted to grow at 1.8% by the end of the year by Moody's is not sufficient for a country the size of Nigeria.
Moody's is saying 1.9.
Yeah, 1.8, 1.9. I think everybody's around that figures for year end.
Okay.
Neither here nor there, but the question is that our population is growing at 3% per annum, and we've not been able to sustain economic growth over and exceed 3%. So consequently, because we've not been able to grow our economy at over 3% per annum, you have 100 million Nigerians who are in poverty. And the question is that if you have this sort of situation, the economy of Nigeria should be going at least 6.5 to 7% per annum in the minimal, and optimally at double digits for us to see some sort of significant increase or sustainability in our lifestyle. The other weakness which the report highlighted was the issue of the fiscal and the institutional deficits and weaknesses. The economy still remains fragile. The government is spending about 60% of its revenues to service debt, despite high oil prices, and our ability to diversify economy into non-oil revenues. We're looking at those issues to see how they can work. Invariably, I think these are the challenges that this government faces. We're looking at the National Economic Recovery Growth Plan, and we're beginning to see how this plan is impacting to be able to grow the economy. And I think that it's important that, as we're going towards the election season, the government should actually sit down, review this economic recovery growth plan, look at what the results are, and to be able to rejig it and to be able to make the necessary adjustments to create the stimulus to grow this economy. Because right now, things are not working the way they should be.
So the report also said something like this B2 stable kind of has an effect on Nigeria's fiscal strength. What do you make of that in essence?
Well, the essence is that if the fiscal strength of the government is very weak, then the government cannot put money into investments. Because by the time you're using 60% of revenues to service debt, even me and you that we're in households, we cannot use 60% of our income to service debt. It's not sustainable on the long run. So that's why I'm saying that we need to have a new structure, because the strength of this economy also right now is its current weakness, which is the population. Because we have a population of about 160 million people, there's demand for consumables, for investment. So we need to take advantage of that and to be able to get productivity up in terms of how we can create the stimulus to continue to sustain this economy. So the outlook is stable means that we have something credible that we can build on to be able to grow the economy. But that requires leadership and that requires direction. And that's why I mentioned we need to rejig this National Economic Recovery Growth Plan. It's time to restructure that plan.
One of those things that or factors that you think we have now refer to the large size of the economy, which the report also referenced, and of course giving us some midterm growth prospects.
Yes, I mean, that's the strength of this economy, and that's what we need to build on. It's important that our population should be an advantage to us, not a weakness. Because if you're not growing the economy, we find that 100 million Nigerians are now in poverty. But if you can lift all those people out of poverty into the middle class, if you have 100 million people out of poverty that are productive, then they have what you will call demand. They have disposable income, which will generate demand, and they are spending to be able to stimulate the economy. So it's very important that we do that. So there is potential in the economy, and that is always what we have been categorized as stable. We have something to build on, but we need the leadership, we need the economic direction, and we need the plan to be able to get us there.
Let's talk about the debt levels. The report also says Nigeria's debt levels around 20% for the 20% of the GDP by 2019. I know it looks like this factored in or priced in the fact that before we did the Eurobond in November, we were around 19% of GDP. Tells you that we're rising. How sustainable do you think that is, given what this report also says?
Well, Nigeria's debt is becoming a problem in earnest, and we should not hide under the fact that our debt, the total value of our debt, is 20% of our GDP. We have to take a look at the trajectory of the growth of that debt. In the last 2 years, our debt has doubled from 11 trillion naira to 22 trillion naira in 3 years. And the result of that is that we are now using 60% of our revenues to service debt, despite high oil prices. So therein lies the problem. We have a fiscal crisis. And I think it's also time for us to begin to take a look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, because this administration is getting very close to violating the terms and conditions of that Fiscal Responsibility Act, because there is a law that also tells the government that there are certain things that they cannot go beyond. So we're reaching the limits of even the law. So if we're not very careful, the activities of our rising debt profile is going to be in violation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And I think it's important that we need to look at that Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the government needs to begin to address this fiscal issue, because right now we're in fiscal crisis. And you can also understand that the budget was also not passed early, and so spending also has been delayed, which is a problem, which is another thing that is affecting the growth of our economy.